Right, so as the fallout from the BBC presenter scandal moves on a little bit now, more people are now asking questions of Rupert Murdoch rather than Huw Edwards, to which I'm thinking at last, about time. So what are we going to do about him then? One of the most relevant interventions on this subject actually came on the Newsagents podcast, where John Sopel and Emily Maitlis were interviewing David Yelland, a former editor of The Scum. I refuse to refer to the hated Murdoch rag in question as The Sun. It doesn't light up my day, nor anyone else's, really. It's irony, frankly, since it keeps us all in the dark. And Yelland pretty much admitted to this. He said, "From my own experience, when I took over The Scum, I wrote a leader in the first few weeks that basically said why the BBC should be closed down. And I did that because I'd been in New York for 10 years, working for Murdoch over there. But why did I do it? I did it because I wanted to curry favour with Rupert, if I'm honest. And I see this the whole time, the way to curry favour with the boss, not just at The Scum, but at the Mail as well, is to do that." That's a former editor, a former longtime Murdoch employee, basically admitting to writing news stories, an opinion piece in this instance, done not to inform, but to influence people and to please the boss. An attack on a Murdoch competitor as the BBC is, as much as I've followed a narrative of believing the timing of this hit piece on Huw Edwards, the release of it, which The Scum have known about the allegations surrounding this since May, unfounded as they turned out to be, the release of the story here and now as Johnson is dying on his feet over the Privileges Committee incident, over still not handing over his phone because he's forgotten the passcode. Thank God we never trusted him with nuclear codes or anything important, eh? Whoops, we did. But it felt like a dead cat story thrown out by a paper already making a loss, that arguably from a financial perspective, Murdoch can afford to lose if the Scum were to collapse, only there to sell his propaganda to those still daft enough to buy it. But of course, there is another angle to that, because it also becomes a hit piece on the BBC once more, which he hates. However you choose to define Murdoch's reasoning for running with a fake news story as a cover to bury real news for favoured interests, or to damage a competitor falsely in this instance, it's not like the BBC covered itself in glory, that there aren't genuine issues with it that could be picked up upon. Ultimately, the motive, though, whatever the result, was one of misleading the public. Of that, I'm sure we'd all agree. It's what he's had a history of doing going back decades. It's what has made him so unpopular amongst so many people who were switched on to him, but sadly not enough to put him out of business here. His influence has delivered his chosen candidate for Prime Minister in every election since 1979. He got his way with Brexit, and his influence affects us all in British society, whether you think so or not. The playwright Dennis Potter died of pancreatic and liver cancer in 1994, but in his last interview, he said, "One of the favourite fantasy plots of a writer is a character told he's got 3 months to live," which is what I was told. "Who would you kill? I call my cancer, the main one, the pancreas one, Rupert, so I can get close to it. Because that man Murdoch is the one who, if I had time, in fact I've got too much writing and I haven't got the energy, but I would shoot the bugger if I could. There is no one person more responsible for the pollution of what was already a fairly polluted press, and the pollution of the British press is an important part of the pollution of British political life. And it's an important part of the cynicism and misperception of our own realities that is destroying so much political discourse. Naming the cancer that is killing you after Murdoch is quite a statement, and although obviously I can't condone the violence referred to in that quote, he's not wrong when he talks about press pollution and the pollution of British political life. Because even if you avoid his newspapers, The Scum and The Times, his reach goes far beyond that anyway. Consider his Talk TV news channel and indeed Talk Radio as well. Fox News brought to the UK in effect, and look who he has on there working for him. Of course, there are the right-wing supposed journalists like Tom Newton-Dunn and Julia Hartley-Brewer and concrete grower Mike Graham, but there are also politicians literally working for him these days, Tory MPs like Nadine Dorries. But most notably, for people who are advocating for Reform UK as an alternative to the Tories, both the Reform UK leader Richard Tice and the deputy leader David Bull are presenters on Talk TV. It should be called less Reform UK and more the Rupert Murdoch Party. Of course, they aren't the only politicians who bow and scrape to him, because that has been going on going back decades. Murdoch has just held his summer party, of course, so who was on that guest list? Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer for starters, so both main party leaders are already in his thrall. Both know their chances of remaining or becoming Prime Minister depend largely on who Murdoch decides he's going to favour. Murdoch's interference in elections is legendary, not just here though, But in the US, where he stoked up the narrative surrounding the last US election being rigged, egging on the dangerous talk of Donald Trump, and he does likewise in his native Australia, though he is, of course, a US citizen these days. What drives him as a multi-billionaire is not what is in our interest, merely in his own. It's notable, therefore, that in New Zealand, he's banned from owning any kind of business or company because they see him for what he is and what he does. Sunak and Starmer weren't the only guests, of course, at his recent summer bash. Wes Streeting was there, Rachel Reeves was there, London Mayor Sadiq Khan was there, Liz Truss was there. The list goes on. In fact, Wes Streeting was later asked by LBC presenter Ian Dale as to why he went, and his excuse was that he doesn't understand his view where you shut people off and don't talk to them. Well, how many people have you blocked on social media again, Wesley? Remind me. I don't know why I'm asking him, really. I'm one of them. But he's also literally blocked health advocates like Dr. Bob Gill, who directed the film The Great NHS Heist about the self-privatisation of the health service. And Wesley wants to be the health secretary. No wonder he's pro-private health interests. No wonder he's also sniffing around Murdoch's feet. Someone who certainly wasn't and never did attend such scenes was a certain Jeremy Corbyn, who as far back as 2011, at the time of the News of the World phone hacking scandal, was saying the events demonstrate the danger of concentrating media ownership and that the Murdoch empire, amongst others, needs breaking up. He was right then, and he's still right now. Murdoch, arguably more than any other figure, and this really is saying something, when he doesn't live here, he doesn't hold British citizenship, but he's responsible for the downward spiral more than anyone else that we find our society in, as we consistently vote in people he backs that end up not delivering for us, but delivering for the Murdochs of this world and the wealthy elite that they belong to. Notably, amongst all of this, and due to it being the biggest issue of our time, is climate change. Murdoch has always been a climate change denier. Now, all of a sudden, we have Sunak not interested in climate change, and Starmer watering down his own green policy pledges and declaring his hatred of tree huggers. Heck, you can imagine Murdoch actually saying that himself, can't you? I hate tree huggers. Tell me all that's coincidence, though. Through his papers, through radio, through TV, Murdoch pervades. And when you have politicians presenting his TV shows, his radio shows, and writing regularly in his papers, it should tell you without question whose side they are on and who they will act on behalf of should they ever attain power. Acts such as these should turn the public off them en masse, identify them as total wrong-uns and say, no, I'm not working for you and I'm not voting for you. Acquiescing to Murdoch and seeking his approval should be the equivalent of political bubonic plague to voters. The only way to hurt this man is to remove his influence. You stop buying his papers, you turn off his media outlets. You condemn utterly any politician who seeks his approval by featuring in his media or toddling off to hobnob with him in the hope of a positive byline somewhere or a few column inches to pen their own piece. If you're still more angry about what Huw Edwards gets up to in his private life than you are about this, then I'm sorry, but you're part of the problem. All of our collective rage and scrutiny should be on Murdoch first and foremost, and those who seek his approval second, not the victims of his actions, whatever you might think of what they get up to behind closed doors. Murdoch has done more damage to our society than any one politician, newsreader, or media figure ever has. Until we take a leaf out of New Zealand's book, that's not going to change. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video useful. If so, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. Meanwhile, stick with the channel a bit longer and check out this video recommendation, where as much as Keir Starmer will scurry off to a Murdoch party, where it comes to speaking to ordinary members, such as at the recent Durham Miners Gala, well, he couldn't be seen for dust. And I'll catch you hopefully on the next video. Cheers, folks.